Well, the point is, and the officer's point was true, you would have had time to stop. That's going to take you at least an hour. Eat your dinner. That's a good interval. So.
Depends on how many drinks you've had, Chris. You're Smart Serve certified. How long do you need to wait to metabolize one unit of alcohol?
Well, Smart Serve would tell you that for an average sized male, you can consume 1 unit of alcohol per hour up to 5 hours. So that's that. I think this part's getting cut, but it's such a fucking good story.
It is a great story.
Welcome to the Toronto Beer Podcast with me, Chris Schreier, and my co-host, Mandie Murphy. How you doing, Mandie?
I'm good, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing good now. Those of you listening at home, for one, you're probably noticing it's a Monday, not a Friday, that you were allowed to access this fantastic podcast that we put together for you every 2 weeks. We could pretend that was intentional, that we decided, during the summer, you got weekends, you're going to the cottage, it's pretty busy, whatever. But like come Monday, you're really bored and want something to do. So we've started releasing it on Monday, and that sounds really good. But the truth is we actually tried to record this 3 times this week, and all 3 times something went wrong and we weren't able to do it. But here we are. It is now Saturday morning at 9:42 a.m. And we are finally recording this. So I'm feeling really good to be doing it. I joked, I've got a new microphone set up, and I was joking with Mandie that it was just fate wasn't letting us record until I was sitting in front of this beautiful new Rode Podcaster mic on a beautiful broadcast arm that makes me feel like I'm in a radio station. So I feel great. How about you?
I'm great, Chris. I'm glad we're finally able to get to this. I wish you hadn't blown our cover there. I like the sounds of just releasing the podcast on Monday morning as a strategic thing rather than a mess up and us not being able to get to the record all week long. But I guess we can be honest and truthful with the listeners, and it's not a bad thing to do.
I think honesty is the best policy.
It is, I agree. And I'm curious about your new mic over there. What are you going to do with your extra hand freedom? Open some beers?
Yeah, definitely. I plan to. In fact, I'm just looking at the beer I'm drinking, which I'll tell you all about in a second, and it's getting pretty low. But because now I'm recording at my main sort of desk, which is in my bedroom, which is immediately next to my beer fridge, I can now just reach in and pull out a beer. For re-beer, I don't have to get up and leave and make you talk to people alone.
That's pretty handy. I like it.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about it myself. So speaking of which, I'm drinking what I think could be the perfect breakfast beer for this year or forever, really. I'm having an Amsterdam Brewing Sweetwater Squeeze, which of course is a Radler they make with blood orange soda that they produce themselves. And I actually don't know what the base beer is. I don't have the can with me. I don't know if it's just blonde or if they make a different beer. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's delicious and fruity, and it's only 3.8% alcohol, so it's a good way to start the day, considering I started drinking this at about 8:40 a.m. And so yeah, we're doing good. Are you consuming something, or are you being very socially responsible and drinking a cup of coffee?
I am consuming something, and it is a type of brew, but I have to admit it is coffee. I'm not drinking a beer.
It's a coffee stout, did you say?
Yeah, we'll go with that. It's coffee stout, house brewed coffee stout.
That sounds delicious. It's homebrew.
Yeah.
Nice. So hey, how was your OCB week? Because it feels like a long time ago now, but this is the first podcast after OCB week ended.
OCB week was fun. It's always a lot of fun. I have to admit, as much fun as it is, it really does wipe me out. I guess I'm getting old, or I don't know, out of practice, but it's a lot of drinking and event attending in 1 week, and we didn't even have a very busy OCB week compared to most, but I don't know, it really wiped me out. So I'm thankful for the extra time this week to get to the podcast, because I was just in no frame of mind to do it with you on Monday.
Yeah, for real. It's funny. I was actually in the exact same space, because I think I told everyone I was doing like 2 barbecues 2 days in a row. And so Saturday I did a barbecue, and then Sunday I did another barbecue. And as you talked about, I did actually make it with the whole family over to the Beaches Barbecue and Brews Fest. But I fell asleep at home at probably 7:30 p.m. and Erica woke me up to move to bed, I think, because I was just out. I was so tired. And Monday I was a bit better, but I could have done with the extra time. So that was good. What was your top event?
Oh, by far, it would have to be the event that we did down at the Renaissance Hotel in the Rogers Center. I thought it was going to be a cool event. I thought it was going to be a lot of fun, but the team down at the Renaissance at the Ariba restaurant totally exceeded our expectations. They killed it with the pairings, and they were just such a professional staff. The game, we had no idea how a beer dinner would go during a game, right? Like, you have no idea if the game's going to go way longer than the dinner, or if the dinner's going to go way longer than the game, if it's going to be a good and entertaining game. And they ended up finishing just around the exact same time. The Jays won. So like, we couldn't have planned it to go off as well as it did. It was just a ton of fun. I can't wait to do another event or dinner with them. It was really, really a great atmosphere and totally different for a beer dinner. Like, Chris, at beer dinners, you usually sit around, have great conversation with the people you're at with at your table. You listen to the brewmaster, the people from the brewery give little spiels for each course, and you just end up having a jolly good time. But a beer dinner during a game was, like, logistically a bit of a crazy thing to pull off, because there was the excitement of the game going on, and you were also trying to get in the conversation around the beer and the food. So it was a little bit more like energetic and chaotic than a beer dinner would normally be, but it ended up being really unique and really fun. We'll have to get you to come down to the next one we do. We'll definitely be doing it again.
I love that a place that is not like a classically thought of beer type place not only did like a pairing dinner, but really, knocked it out of the park, could you say? But because you think about beer dinners, like places like Beer Bistro and Cayley Cottage, obviously always does a really fantastic job at that sort of thing. And, you wouldn't necessarily think a hotel place would be, I don't want to say able. I mean, they're all professionals, I'm sure, but that it wouldn't have been something necessarily they would do, but that they did it well. That's fantastic. So I actually barely got out in OCB week. I went to the pub crawl, which I texted you or messaged you about, and I went, and I just showed up at the Only, the last stop, and waited around for like an hour and 20 minutes, and friend of the show, Chris Grimley, turned up. And we hung out because he'd bailed, because he said whatever the previous stop was just really crowded and he just wasn't feeling it. And so he came over to the Only before everyone else. But the pub crawl still hadn't made it to the Only by 11:15 when I decided to knock it on the head and go home. So I was on the pub crawl, just not with anybody else who also was on the pub crawl. It was a bit of a strange situation, but and that was about it for me, aside from the Beaches Barbecue and Beer Fest.
That's awfully late. You said they got to the Only around 11:30.
I don't know, because I was gone. I left at 11:15. Yeah, whew. I know they were supposed to be there at 10, so that was my OCB week. Nobody came up to me and said, "Hey, I listened to the podcast. Put me in the contest." Did anyone say that to you?
No, nobody.
Well, that saves us time and effort generating prizes. That's good. If you're listening to this and you wanted to get into the contest, too bad. Maybe we'll do another one sometime. But yeah, that was an interesting experiment. Hey, I've been noticing some pretty cute pictures, some more pretty cute pictures. I'm sorry to keep banging on about your dog, but my gosh, that's a cute dog.
Don't apologize. I'm happy to talk about Wrigley for the entire podcast. In fact, we should do one episode that's just 100% Wrigley all the time.
Maybe we could actually get him on and like get him to like, snuffle into the mic and maybe bark, and, he'll probably will shake his ears and make that flappy, leathery ear sound,
I'm sure that can be arranged.
We could work on that, eh? When is pickup? When do you get him?
We pick him up tomorrow afternoon, so Sunday afternoon. So by the time this airs, he'll be home with us, and we'll probably be cuddling, maybe
cleaning
playing
up pee.
with some chew toys on the floor, and doing some photo shoots, generally looking adorable.
When is his first trip to the brewery? Is that going to be Monday?
It'll be right on Sunday. We'll take him there right away, because we have some work to do there on Sunday, so we'll go there. He's going to have two homes, sort of, right? He'll spend a lot of time at the brewery, and he'll spend a lot of time at home with us, but we spend more time at the brewery than we do at home. So he'll have sort of two sets of everything. We'll crate train him, so he'll have a crate at each home, a bed at each home, some toys at each home, food, dishes, and everything. So yeah, it's been an exercise in gathering two sets of everything, which is kind of fun.
It's like having twins.
Yeah.
That, by the way, was an Amsterdam bone shaker, because now that I've had breakfast, it's time to get serious about beer. Well, I'm excited. I might even bring the kids by the brewery on Monday, because I think it's important to socialize puppies with other puppies, in this case, human puppies. And also, I think my kids would go crazy. So if he's ready for socialization on Monday, we'll come by, and I'll also come by and buy some beer because I do love that beer.
Yeah, that sounds great. We agree. We're going to try to socialize him as much as possible, as early as possible, so get him to experience as many different crazy things as we can as early as possible without stressing him out. So it'll be a bit of a balance, but we're excited, really excited. As
a family, and we don't have dogs right now, but we've had dogs in the past. We actually are big proponents of this idea that, especially if you have kids and dogs, the most important training that you do is actually training the kids. It's not so much the dogs. And so for us, this is as much about socializing Grace around puppies and being like, yes, darling, they are adorable. No, they are not stuffed animals. You can hurt them. Don't stick your fingers in their eyes and stuff like that. So it's all part of the process. But that's very, very, very exciting. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to get to the business now. I think that's it for catch up. I had that we have the Saison tasting, but that is happening from time of recording in like 5 hours. So that's going to be long gone by the time this goes live. So
are you willing to share which Saisons you'll be tasting?
I am. Well, there's one. I got to find out. I got to send a message after this and see if it came in. But the 5 that I know we're doing are Nickelbrook Paysan Saison, Amsterdam Leaf Hop Saison, Black Oak Summer Saison. That's going to be on cask. Pretty sweet. Saison DuPont and Saint-Fouillon, I think you say. Both are Belgian. And then the hanger right now is I'm told that we're getting some Saison from Collingwood. Of course, this is I believe it was silver medal winner at the CBAs. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think it could very well be the first one that I coordinated for the tasting, but I haven't heard definitively yet whether or not it came in. It was meant to. So if that's not in, then, and I feel bad even saying this is like a fallback, but then of course we'll do Sunlight Park because we have it on draft. And I might even do a little amuse-bouche for the tasters of Sunlight Park just to whet their whistles, as it were, before the tasting starts. Because right now at Castro's, we are blessed with having too many Saisons, if that's such a thing.
That's not such a thing as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think so either. And the good news is I bought a couple of the Saisons on the tasting. So even after the tasting, even though as you listen to this, that tasting has already happened, you are welcome to come in and try some of our fantastic selection of Saisons. Especially, oh man, those Saison DuPont bottles. I mean, I love Sporting Local. I love you guys. I love everybody in Ontario that makes a good Saison. But man, Saison DuPont is something that is worth $10 a bottle. So anyway, let's move along and let's get controversial. You know, here's where we're at. Okay. Gay marriage just approved in the U.S., making it all of North America. Fantastic news. We've got an election coming up in Canada in October, and we've got this article in the Globe and Mail that says that this pursuit of super hoppy beers might be dulling our beer palates. Did you actually get a chance to read this article, Mandie?
Yeah, I did. I don't know. I can't compare the election in Canada and the news about gay marriage in the U.S., which is just absolutely amazing, to this silly article about hops dulling our palates.
Wait a minute.
I think they are completely. They're not even on the same level. Not even close.
This is huge. Dulling our palates. Come on.
No, I know you're being facetious, but let's just roll back a little bit and talk about how amazing that news is. Like, how did you receive the news from the U.S. yesterday?
Oh, well, I was hanging out with the kids all day because school's out now. So I was hanging out with Ben and Grace, and actually we were at Sky Zone. That's that trampoline place right next to Amsterdam. And I was just checking my Facebook feed, and I'd even forgotten that the news was coming in. And yeah, so that's huge. It's funny though. Honestly, I don't want to trivialize it, but I'm actually not that surprised. I know it's the US and they're really conservative and all that sort of stuff, but I think there was already enough precedent from other examples at state level that really I couldn't see them not doing it. And of course, I'm also not even remotely surprised that places like Mississippi and Louisiana and Texas are saying, well, we don't have to follow this. We're free to set our own laws, which of course is a gross misrepresentation of the truth. But they're running scared right now because the married gay folks are coming for your children. But I was pretty stoked. How about you? Were you intentionally watching, or did you just kind of all of a sudden see the flood on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter or whatever?
Yeah, I had same as you, I had completely forgotten that there was any news to be expected at all. My life the past little while has just been like sort of head down in beer, and I haven't been driving anywhere listening to the news. I haven't had a great deal of time to read news that's not beer related, and so I had completely forgotten this was happening. And I was actually, I guess I was probably a little bit more surprised than you were. I was definitely more surprised than you were. I didn't necessarily see this coming, but like I said, I hadn't had a ton of time to spend on learning, I guess, background.
I think my favorite part about all of it is there was immediately a flood of tweets, and of course somebody's storified it or whatever, but all these people being like, that's it, America's going to hell in a handbasket, gay marriage, I can't believe this, I'm moving to Canada, which is of course fantastic. Actually, one of the best tweets in response to that I saw was like, to everybody in the United States fed up with gay marriage moving to Canada, I wanted to let you know they're having a big party for you this weekend in Toronto, which of course is
I didn't see that one. That's a good one.
It's pretty funny.
That's great.
I like that a lot. Okay, we got to get back to the politics of the matter though, which is, are we ruining our palates with aggressively hopped beers? And of course, I am saying this on thin ice as I am sipping a delicious Bone Shaker from the Amsterdam Brewing Company right in Leaside, Ontario. So what do you think?
I think it's nonsense. I think it's complete nonsense. I think there are some fairly unbalanced opinions presented in the specific article that we're referring to. Things like brewers are just trying to out-hop each other. I don't believe for one second that that's true. I think if you give it some perspective, think about brewers and how often they are consuming other beers from other breweries and experimenting with different styles. They're just spending a great deal of time, more time than the general public, with beer and with interesting and I guess pretty experimental beer.
Yeah.
And I think that just means that their palates are probably at a different place than the general public, right? So they're not trying to out-hop each other. They're just, I guess, pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits of what beer should be, and they probably desire flavors that are a little bit more out there than does the general public. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but I don't think for one second brewers are saying, oh, let's just like out-hop each other, we'll beat each other with IBUs. I know that sort of competitive nature probably does exist to a very small degree between a very, very small percentage of brewers, but I think generally brewers are seeking balanced and delicious beers.
Yeah. So I totally agree. I actually think the article is stupid and clickbaity, and also really, really old news, because people have been saying the same thing since like the early 2000s. So that's for a start. Although, to devil's advocate a little bit, and I don't think it's necessarily the point what's his name? John Suffren was trying to make, but I will say this. I have been disheartened at times listening to sort of the Uber beer people, not brewers, but the fans, right? Hearing people who identify as being, big craft beer drinkers disparaging beers like Steam Whistle, right? Like Boston Lager from Boston Brewing Company, Sam Adams, as being, and the problem, the language they will use is they'll say it's a bad beer, and they are confusing their subjective opinion of taste versus an objective production of beer. And I will say that I think people getting access to really big hoppy beers has, for some people, maybe not changed their palate, but it's made them stupid about beer. Where to them now, the only good thing is a really hoppy beer. And so I think that to some extent that does exist in the population. And actually it can be problematic for a brewery that wants to make a really solid Pilsner, or like, you know, like a really rock solid German style wheat beer, for instance, where, you know, the really geeky people are like, oh, this isn't very good. And it's like, no, you don't think fits what you want in a beer. That doesn't mean it's a bad beer. And that creates some problems. But I think for the most part, the article was, like I said, clickbaity and stupid and unnecessary. So I'm glad we covered that. That, by the way, was the only real kind of beer news thing I could find this week. I normally kind of troll Reddit and Bar Towel and a couple of other places looking for like chat-worthy articles, and there's normally a few, but this week was not a stellar week for beer news, unfortunately. Although, as noted, big week for other news. But yeah.
Just on that point, Chris, I'd been doing the same thing all week, trying to find something to talk about on the podcast, and there was a CBC News article. The headline reads, "Microbreweries not a pint-sized industry anymore." Like, give me a break. This is not news, people. We're really grasping.
That's fantastic. I mean, they're right. It isn't, and hasn't been for like 10 years. So way to keep up on the ball with that one, CBC. So now I want to move into, because we were talking about hoppy beers. And so I put, and this might become a thing. We might try and do like a top 3 or something like that, you know, somewhat regularly on different topics. So this inaugural, possibly final iteration of the Chris and Mandie top 3, I want to talk about, and I put in the show notes, top 3 IPAs ever in the world and history. Go. That's exactly the words I used. And did you have time to think and prepare on this, or do you want me to go first?
I did, but I really suck at narrowing a list to just 3. I hate following those rules. I'm generally a rule follower. I love following rules, but I can't narrow it down to 3 IPAs. So I have a couple different categories of 3. I hope that's okay.
Do you want to go first and do that then?
Sure. Yeah, I can go first. So okay. This is so tough, Chris. So I'm going to talk about some of my favorite IPAs, I guess, from the US, and then talk about IPAs from Ontario. And you know what? I actually shouldn't do that, because I guess that implies that those IPAs should compete on a different level from one another, and I don't believe that's true, like we've talked about in previous podcasts. So give me a second. I'm going to narrow this down, and I'm going to pick just the 3 from US and Canada combined. Do
you want me to go first then?
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm going to take a minute to rearrange my lists.
Okay, so for me, and anybody who, you know, has done a tasting with me or whatever knows that this is a big piece of my opinion on beers, is objectively there are certainly, you know, there are things you can rate beers on and numerical scales and stuff like that. And they're all well and fine, but they don't interest me too much. That's like telling me that the car I'm buying can do like 0 to 60 in 6 seconds or something like that. Those numbers don't actually mean anything in the real world or to me. I'm much more interested in like how it feels and how it makes me feel and stuff like that. So beer and favorite beers to me is like an issue of place and time. So with that in mind, my 3 favorite IPAs. The first one, I think spoke about this in the last episode, and I couldn't tell you the exact first time it happened, but certainly the very first time I was handed a can or a bottle or whatever of Bone Shaker off of the packaging line at Amsterdam, so right out of the tank. That would have been the first time I ever had an IPA out of a tank. And the flavor explosion in my mouth was just probably unlike anything I'd ever had before. And so that, for me, Bone Shaker out of the tank, that's number 1.
Chris, that wasn't a predictable answer at all. I didn't know you liked Bone Shaker.
Really? Yeah. Huh. This episode of Toronto Beer Podcast, by the way, brought to you by Chris's endearing and ever-burning passion for Amsterdam Bone Shaker. So that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be probably... We lived for a while in a house on a street in the beach called Glen Manor, and we were right by the lake. It was very beautiful, and we're very sad to have to leave that place. But that to me was some of the best summers that I've had in the beach. Ben was really young, and Grace was actually born there, and we had this beautiful front balcony that we could sit out on, and we were literally 150 meters from the water, so we could just shoot down to the beach anytime we wanted. And so that whole summer has some amazing memories kind of across the spectrum. But one of them certainly was that also was the first time, that was the first summer when you could get Red Racer IPA in cans, and they were still in the short cans at the LCBO. And I probably bought 5 or 6 flats of that beer throughout the summer. And so no one particular time, just that summer, drinking short cans of Red Racer IPA, either sitting on the balcony or even just sitting at my computer during work or walking down to the beach with the kids because they were small and looked like pop cans. Whatever. That for me was fantastic IPA. And then the last, and again, it's something I talked about, but was the time that I had Karma Citra at the Cask Challenge. And it was blind, and I just immediately knew what it was and how much I loved it. And then the humor of having to kind of go back and remark all the previous beers to kind of create enough headroom for that space for Karma Citra to be in. Those were my 3 top sort of IPA moments in my experience drinking beer. So how's your list looking?
It's looking good. I completely agree with you. That was going to be my story, is that whenever I think to a favorite beer or a top beer, I always think about time and place. And I guess I know there have been a bunch of folks that have written blog posts and articles about this in the past, but I completely agree with those who say that a beer is about more than just the flavor of the beer. I don't think I would have a favorite beer if I had cracked open a can and enjoyed it in a dark basement at home by myself. Usually a beer could taste really great in that environment, but it's not necessarily going to leave you with a memory that will stick with you when you're thinking about beer versus beer versus beer. So most of my favorite beers usually have some sort of a memory or a time and place that I associate with it. And oftentimes, if that's something that's a happy memory or I had a really good time, I think that can really just enhance the flavor of the beer and leave you with a better memory of the beer than just the flavor of the beer alone. So some of my favorites, and this is sort of a predictable answer, I guess, because it's one of a top IPA in the US, would be Heady Topper. And I know that's maybe not a fair answer because I believe it's a double IPA. I might be wrong about that. Is it? It
is a double IPA, yeah.
You know what's really funny? Actually, most of the beers in my list are double IPAs. And you could probably chalk that up to our previous conversation about hop obsessions dulling our beer palates.
Clearly, that's why you disagreed, is because you are a victim of it, and this is your addiction speaking. That wasn't you, Mandie. That wasn't the real you talking there. That was your addiction. Well, maybe the article is correct in that I need bigger, bolder IPAs in order to enjoy them, and so all of my favorite IPAs tend to be double IPAs or imperial IPAs, and you'll see that in the list as I go through it. So. Heady Topper, this wasn't an experience in someone like grabbing me a can and bringing it back across the border and enjoying it randomly here in Ontario. We actually got to go to the brewery when we were down skiing in Vermont. Wow.
And we had gone in on the weekend and they were completely sold out of beer. So I got to experience just walking through the door, seeing empty shelves, feeling like that was a real bummer. But it was a long weekend for us in Canada, and it wasn't a long weekend in the US. And so we were heading back on the Monday, fortunately. So they said they were canning some up on the Monday morning. Come on in and pick it up on your way out of town. So we went back into the brewery on Monday morning. People were rolling out dollies with 7, 8, 9, 2-4s of Heady Topper at a time. And there was a huge lineup, like down the front porch and down the street in front of the brewery. And you couldn't get your car in and out of the parking lot. And this was first thing when they opened. It was like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning. And I don't know if that extra hype associated with the beer created something else in my mind that really made me enjoy it that much more. But when we cracked those cans when we got home, man, oh man, were they ever amazing. And it was like almost as fresh as it gets, right? Like we've talked about in past episodes, it had just been canned. You didn't just have one like at the brewery? Like you didn't just open one in the car in the parking lot or something? No, I'm not big on drinking at 10 a.m., right? Like, I'm drinking coffee right now as we beer podcast. Yeah. So we waited till we got back across the border. We waited till we got home. But it was just so, so good. So fresh.
That actually, by the way, was the first time I ever had Heady Topper was from that hall. Unless you've done that more than once, but it was Mark and I were doing the Brewmance show that we did for a while, and he had it, and he was like, "Let's have one." So that was the very first time I had Heady too. So
that's right. I'd forgotten about that. As people were wandering out with the dollies of like 7 or 8 2-4s, and mind you, a 2-4 is like $70-something. Mm-hmm. People were rolling into their cars with like tons and tons of 2-4s. It was crazy. We're like, should we buy more of this? We really weren't sure if we were buying enough. I think we bought a couple of 6-packs and that was it. But it was just so good.
Amen.
And my next favorite double IPA was a much more recent example. The Heady Topper example is probably from, geez, how long would that have been, Chris? How long ago? Like 4 years, maybe?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years.
Like it's quite a while ago.
Oh, maybe not that far back. Maybe it was a separate Heady Topper hall. Because I'm just thinking it was, you guys were getting ready to launch Left Field kind of as we were finishing the show.
Yeah, so about 3 years.
Oh, okay.
A little over 3 years ago, that would have been.
Yep, sounds good to me.
So that memory's really stuck with me because I've had a lot of really great IPAs between then and now, but that one's just so good. So more recently, when we were down in Portland at the Craft Brewers Conference, we were able to go to the welcome ceremony sort of thing, or welcome gala, and it took place in a stadium, and all the beers were set up around the concourse of a stadium. I think it was a basketball stadium. And a brewery called Fatheads was pouring a double IPA called Head Shrinker. There were just groups and groups and groups of people from Ontario, like different Ontario craft brewery people, standing around this one booth, and we were all sort of passing around and sipping the same double IPA called Head Shrinker. It was completely mind-blowing. It was so good. And so we had such a great experience with it that we went back to the Fatheads brew pub, and we grabbed a growler of it to bring back for the team. As much as we hate growlers, we brought it back for the team to taste it and enjoy it at the brewery. And even like 3 days after getting it back, it was amazing. It was so fresh and so much like juicy citrus. It was tropical fruit. It was delicious. But that, again, another double IPA. And then I have 2 Ontario examples.
Go for it. You can have 4. I'll give you 4.
That I completely love. And for me, they're kind of tied. One's a double IPA, the other's not. So Nickelbrook's Immodest double IPA. I've had a more recent version of the can of that. Actually, both of the beers that I'm going to tell you here have they were from the Only. So at the Only craft beer fests, I think, which relate to that sort of time and place thing. So Immodest double IPA, and then Great Lakes Karma Citra. The first time I had tried both of those beers were at the Only during Craft Beer Fest, I believe. And then just incredible IPAs. Love them both very much.
Fantastic. What do you guys got coming up? I think we have one more thing in the show notes, but I'm going to leave that. We can do that anytime. So what's new for Left Field? You got a dog? Anything else?
The dog is the big latest thing, but beer-wise, we are getting ready to bring back another version of Prospect, our single hop IPA. Single hop IPA series, rather. So this one will be featuring Simcoe, which is a hop we haven't used before in the Prospect series.
And it's a hop I love. It's a good dual use hop. It's good bittering and aroma hop. So
we just rocked a bunch of the casks yesterday and dry hopped with, of course, Simcoe. You can't use another hop in a single hop IPA.
It's true.
So we dry hopped with Simcoe, and
hey, you guys fill any pins of that, or just firkins? Yeah,
we have a handful of pins.
You want to throw a piece of masking tape on one of those and write Castor's Lounge on it?
Yeah, let me make sure they're not all allocated at the brewery, but I think we can arrange for that to happen.
That'd be fantastic. That's just how easy it is, by the way, guys. If you want to make an order with Left Field, step 1, start a podcast with Mandie. Step 2, place an order while recording the podcast.
And then you just can't say no, can you?
Well, you could and just make me edit it out, so that's fine.
I think we should be all right. We just filled the casks yesterday, so I don't think they're all allocated. We do like to keep as many of them for ourselves as possible now that we have the tap room.
Right, of course. It gives us especially the pins, I guess. That's a bit easier to get through, so.
And then I hope to bring one down with me to the Brewers' Backyard on Canada Day.
Oh, cool, yeah.
So we'll be down at the Brickworks, and I'll be pouring most likely Sunlight Park Saison, Maris Our Pale Ale, Aoife's Oatmeal Brown Ale, and then hopefully a cask of the Prospect. So that
by the way, was a great segue into what else you're doing, namely the Brewers' Backyard on Wednesday.
Yeah, so those are the next couple of big things we have coming up. A new beer in very limited supply. We'll just have the one batch of it. We'll probably bottle off a handful of bottles, and you can find it around town on draft. And then also, of course, at the brewer's backyard. And I'll be holding on to a bunch of kegs of that to pour at the Toronto Festival of Beer in July.
That's fantastic. For myself, I got nothing coming up. I'm living the dream. Actually, that's not entirely true. We're probably moving in August, which is going to be something of a nightmare, but it'll be for the better. So sort of like ripping off a Band-Aid, you got to do it. So we're going to do that. But I don't know, I'll be at the only summer beer festival probably. I won't be at Toronto Festival of Beer because I'll be in Muskoka at my friend's wedding. And although I might make it, I'm pretty excited to Session Muskoka, which of course is up in Bracebridge. And I've wanted to go to pretty much since its inception, and I've never made it for myriad reasons, but I think this year I'm gonna make it, which is pretty exciting. So that'll be something if I make it up there.
That's a fun one. I can't believe you haven't been to it before. You're really going to enjoy it. Like I'll predict that you're going to really enjoy the atmosphere and the vibe that goes on at that fest. It's so relaxed. If you can imagine like how you feel when you go to cottage country, plus a beer festival on top of that, that's exactly what it is. It's exactly what you would expect it to be, but it's just so relaxed and so much fun.
Oh yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'm seriously so excited. I do hope I make it. Hope everything goes to plan there. So that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in, Toronto. Mandie, probably see you at the brewery when we come to visit the pub.
Yeah, please do come visit the pub, and can't wait to see how the kids like our little non-stuffed toy.
That's fantastic. Thanks for listening, Toronto. We'll talk to you in about 2 weeks.